Hi, and welcome back to the show. My name is Jackie, and I'm the host. Today I'll be speaking with Darcy, who's a local strongman and has been permanently disabled in a workplace incident. Listen in as he shares his challenges, grief, and ultimately his faith and hope. Darcy, thank you so much for coming on to the podcast. Really appreciate that you're here.
Yeah, well, thank you very, very much for having me here. It's exciting.
Yes. Why don't you just start off and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Most people that do know me probably for strongman over the last few years. And more recently, I think people know me for an injury that I've sustained that I'm still recovering from. But other than that, I came from a reasonably normal family, reasonably normal childhood, and I've had a lot of different hardships that came kind of after the childhood. A lot of people I find have the traumas during childhood. I was kind of a little later in life with young adulthood and things like that. That's a that's a little brief part.
A little summary.
Yeah.
Reasonably normal, meaning like parents still together?
Well, my dad's passed away in 2020. But they were still married when he passed away, so there was no divorce or anything like that. There was maybe a couple of times to where things were getting a little thin in that regard with my parents, and I definitely noticed that. That was more through like middle school and high school. They were having a couple of issues, and I would hear more from my dad's side of things. But they managed to pull through and stick through it, and stayed together and until my dad's health started declining, and obviously that cemented things right there.
Yeah. Well, I'm sorry for your loss in your dad.
Yeah, thank you.
You got siblings?
I do. I've got an older sister and a younger brother. They actually just had their birthday yesterday.
Twins?
No.
Oh.
No, they are 6 years apart.
But the same day?
The same birthday.
I guess everyone's older and one's younger.
Yeah, exactly.
Twins.
Yeah, I think because my sister would have been 6 when he was born, so I think they came back from the hospital. It's like, oh, you got a brother for your birthday? And she's like, I wanted a Barbie.
Oh my gosh, that's too good. You don't hear that very often.
No, it's it usually catches people by surprise when I mention it. It's like, oh, this, and same thing. Everyone's like, oh, they're twins. Like, no.
And how about you? You got any kids?
Yeah, I've got a daughter. She's 7 years old. She's full of piss and vinegar, just like most kids. Sometimes hard to handle. I'm still learning how to handle that. Her mother and I separated, a long time ago now. Over 6 years ago now, so she was only 1 year old when that happened. So I was kind of in that situation of like figuring out how the heck do I parent, and then suddenly I'm having to figure out how to do that on my own. So that's been a lot of challenges that have come with that, and trying to overcome those challenges, because ultimately I want to give her a good life, and that's kind of my main motivation for a lot of the things that I do, and whether that's showing through example of what you can do with hard work, and the things that you can get through without being a victim of circumstances and things like that. And that's kind of the foundation that I want to build within her is don't let the little things get you down.
Why don't we move into, when you think of holding on to your heart, what is the thing that you think of?
So I've thought about this, and I've really narrowed it down to, I think, 2 words, which are hope and belief. And for me, that just comes down to always having, never losing that hope that things are going to get better and that life is going to work out the way that you intend it to. And then just always having that belief that it will. And I think as long as you hold on to those 2 things, you can't go wrong. Life's going to throw a bunch of curveballs, and it's going to be difficult, and you can fall into that status of victimhood and allowing those things to become part of your identity. And I think that they should be part of not the identity, but part of the journey. I think at the end of all things, if you tell a story and it's like everything was easy, Nobody's interested in that story. But if you tell the story of all the hardships that you've been through and all the things that you've been able to overcome, that's a much more exciting story.
So is there a time in your life where you've had to hold on to hope and belief?
Yeah. If I'm being very honest, the last, I don't even know how many years now, it hasn't been easy. Like I said, I went through a divorce and everything like that, trying to learn how to be a parent. And, there's been a lot of financial hardships that have come along with that. Trying to find my place in the world with work and, what I love to do. And I've tried a couple of things. I was a chef for 12 years of my life, and I went to work out in Alberta, working in camps and things like that. That's where the money is. Generally those types of things, you go to where the money is. And I got out of that because I have a daughter, and I didn't want to work that lifestyle to where I had to be away from home. Because that's how it is. You're gone for 3 weeks, you're home for a week, and it's not really a week because there's travel times in between, and then you're tired, you're exhausted. And that wasn't the life that I wanted. Not as a parent, not for my daughter. I wanted to try and create something better. So I got into quite a number of years ago, doing like digital marketing and like trying those different types of things, and seeing if I could make something work to where I could bring the money in and have that time freedom to be able to spend with my daughter as she's growing up. But such is life, things didn't quite work out as planned. That kind of failed. I got into some car sales for a little bit, which was going all right. And then the whole COVID thing happened. I ended up getting let go because, let's face it, as everybody was losing their jobs, nobody was buying cars at the time. So I just kind of got the short end of the stick on that one, and I got let go. And that was kind of the start of like a very difficult time, because there was no work. There was 6 months out of that year where there was no work going on, and all I could really do was focus on myself. So I went on my like fitness journey then, which is a little hard to tell. I'll get to that part, but. During that time, I lost, I think it was like 85 pounds.
Nice.
I was down to 195 pounds. It's the lightest I've ever been in my adult life. And, I was going through that and doing really well. I was going through, maybe you've heard of it, I was going through 75 hard. I just recently won a trip down to St. Louis, Missouri, to go visit a supplements company. And I won that with a Lead by Example award. And that was part of the weight loss and everything that I've done, and showing people that, hard work, this is the results that you're going to get. And I got back from that, and, COVID time, so I had to quarantine for the 2 weeks. If you went out of country, they were forcing you to, kind of quarantine. And before that 2 weeks had ended, is when my dad passed away. So, all the progress that I had made or had been making or thought I had been making in terms of like my mental fortitude, my mental toughness, the one thing I wasn't prepared for was losing my dad. And it was a really tough time. I kind of really fell apart mentally. And then shortly after that, I got a new job, so I kind of just mentally threw myself into that kind of as a distraction. The health started slipping from there, the weight started coming back on, and, just going through that, I had my family, my mom, my sister, my brother, but, I've always kind of dealt with hardships alone. And that's kind of what I did. I don't think that's the healthiest thing to do, but that's how kind of how I've handled a lot of things throughout my life. I've always been kind of the black sheep. I've always felt a little bit outcast from society in a sense. I've always had difficulty making friends. Very, very few people that I would consider good friends to this day. And
Am I on the list?
You are.
Yay.
You know, actually, you were the only person to come visit me when I got injured. So that's showing friendship. So I never did get to share my appreciation for that. But thank you.
Aw.
So yeah, you know, dealing with the loss of my dad, I didn't deal with it in the healthiest way. Throwing myself into a new job, which I no longer have, and then yeah, kind of going back about a year and a half ago. You know, I started getting some more ambitions. I ended up leaving that one job that I threw myself into, and I was actually trying to start my own business. You know about this already, and you know, I was trying to start a meal prepping business. It was going to be called Strong Chef Meal Prep, and I'm sure there's a few people around town that probably heard about it, maybe were excited about it, and probably wondering what the heck happened. And there's a very good reason for that, I promise. So I started doing that. I left the other job and I started working on this new project because I wanted to bring that to the community. I think it's something that we were severely missing. And you know, in the meantime, I still needed you can't start a business with no money. So I needed to get out there and do some work. I went and worked for a friend for a little bit doing some concrete, and that ended a little bit quicker than I would have liked. And then I took another job shortly after that, delivering furniture. And I was there for a week. And the reason I was there for a week is because I actually got injured on the job. So it's a little hard to tell, but I'm actually wearing a knee brace under this. But approximately 15 months ago, I completely dislocated my knee. I fully ruptured my ACL, my MCL, my PCL. I tore my meniscus. I fractured my femur. I think I tore the quad as well, a couple other things. And that was severe, very, very severe. When I asked the surgeon, on a scale of like 1 to 10, how bad is this? And without hesitation, he said 9. 8.5, 9. A 10 would have been losing the leg. So I did it about as bad as one person can do without, you know, losing the leg. And, you know, that's been an incredibly difficult process. For almost 15 months and counting. I've had 2 surgeries from that. And just this last week, I was finally classified as permanently disabled. So it's, you know, something that's going to affect me for the rest of my life. And a lot of the things that it's taken from that, you know, I trained, I competed as a strongman athlete. And I did that for a couple of seasons, and I was getting quite good. You know, I qualified for provincials, which would have been last year. I inevitably didn't get to go because of the injury. But, you know, that was a big chunk of my life. You know, that's something I worked really hard for. You know, with the training, if anyone has seen strongman training, it's not for the faint of heart. You know, it was something I loved to do. You know, when I was struggling with the loss of my dad and everything like that, that's kind of when I found, you know, the sport of strongman. You know, I would just go to the gym because I just wanted to lift something heavy, and then somebody had suggested to me like, "Hey, have you ever tried strongman?" And I thought, no, but that sounds like a lot of fun. So I decided to register for the local one here in Cranbrook, and you know, it's one of those things like once you do it once, you're hooked. You know, because I then went on to you know, the next 2 competitions. I ended up getting a podium finish. I think it was just shy on the 3rd one after that, and then qualified for provincials last year. And then the injury happened. So it's been like this, you know, peaks and valleys roller coaster of, you know, things are starting to look good, and then here's this thing that's happened that now I get to deal with. So it's one of those things where, you know, I could have chosen and probably had every right to just kind of give up on a lot of things. And maybe in some ways I did temporarily, but, I'm not the type of person to stay down. You can knock me down and I might be down for a little bit, but I'm always going to get back up. And it's the same thing dealing with, dealing with this injury. I have goals of competing again. Will I ever be able to at the same capacity? I don't know yet. But it is the goal, and that is what I'm going to be working towards. And, it's the type of thing, strength sports in general, there's different roads that I can take, whether it's, grip sports or, a bench press or whatever it might be. There's always different options. There's also, like disabled athlete routes that I could potentially take, and that's always in the back of my mind or on the back burner, so to speak, as kind of option B.
I'll never forget the day that you did get your injury, and I didn't, at the time, I was so kind of clueless to how severe it truly was for you, right? I think you texted me and said, this just happened, and I was like, holy smokes, right? But not realizing how much that was actually going to take from you, how long it was going to take to recover, what that truly meant, because you hear a leg break and it's like, oh, okay, a couple of weeks in a cast, it'll be fine, right? But it really has set you back. I mean, maybe, right, in a few ways when you weren't really planning on. No one really plans on it, but
no,
it set you back quite a bit, right? I feel like you had to spend quite a bit of time alone, recovering, traveling to Kelowna for surgeries and checkups, and yeah,
and it's been one of those. One of those things where, nobody expects it to be so bad. I even had someone say oh, it's just a dislocation. You just pop it back in, you're fine. And it's no, it's not fine. When it first happens, anytime anybody gets an injury like that, it's always oh, I'll bounce back. I'll be fine. And then as time goes on and it's not getting better and it's okay, now you have to go for a second surgery, and it's never ending in that sense. And I think what really made it difficult is, in terms of workers' compensation and things like that, I was 7 days into a new job, and it was furniture delivery, so it's not exactly a very lucrative job to start with. And of course, workers' compensation bases all of the income based off of what you were earning at the time, which was difficult because I hadn't even had a full paycheck yet at that point. So financially, it's been extraordinarily stressful. It's been kind of a scrape by. It's like a survival wage. It's not a livable wage because that's not living. And that's been a kind of a major crutch because, in the meantime, it's I can't go earn more money. It's my right to earn a living has been, kind of cut off for the meantime. And it's not having very many options in terms of survivability. It's just, the absolute bare essential, minimum, no buying new clothes, no buying this, no buying that. It's survival, and it's been 15 months now. And I think that would break a lot of people. And it's come close for me, believe me. But it comes down to that, I'm not going to give up. Looking at how things have been over the last year and a half, like I said, it would crush most people, and most people would give up, and most people would play that victim card to where it becomes a contest of who's the biggest poor me. And right off the get-go, I didn't want that. I even told people do not feel sorry for me. This is just another challenge in life, and it's not ideal. It's not the way I wanted it to go by any means, but it is life, and we all deal with different challenges. My almost losing my leg is somebody's losing their child, or, you know, actually losing their leg. You know, there's always...
Yeah. Someone's got their worst thing.
Exactly. Them, you know, right? It's like, it feels bad. It feels like the worst thing in the world. But, you know, I don't know if I'd want to meet the man who has it worse than everybody else. Mm-hmm. Or maybe I do, because then it really would set things into perspective. Mm-hmm. You know, if you can identify the person that has it worse than anybody else and look at them and be like, okay, my life's not that bad.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's I think it is just so objective, like, because it's personal to us and to you, right? Like, it's not like who has it worse, but it's like the biggest challenge that you're faced with right now. Mm-hmm. Maybe you'll have something harder down the line. Like, we just don't know. But right now, this is you, and it's taken things from you, and it's your experience in it. And, like, we get that space to say, this sucks for me, right? And I feel like, yeah, I don't know. I just relate to that thing of, like, feeling like I have to compare my worst thing and think, well, I'm going to diminish it because this person's going through that. When it's like, you know, it's irrelevant. Like, that is a perspective, but we still need to honor what's true for us.
Yeah.
Right? So, yes, feel free to talk about it being the worst thing, right? It's your worst thing, right? And it's extreme, right? And I think you said a thing about, like, it almost breaking you, right? And like, I wonder, like, was there something that you remember, like a time it almost broke you, like the day, the situation, or?
You know, I remember more than once praying for a miracle. And then realizing that I have to be. You know, nobody's going to come to save you, so you have to save yourself.
It's a hard truth sometimes, isn't it?
It is. But for me, I think that's the way I need to look at it. Mm-hmm. You know, as difficult as things are, it will get better. Mm-hmm. You know, as hard as it is, that molds you. Mm-hmm. You know, it's like I said before, you know, that story that I'll tell is going to be so much better mm-hmm. than the story of everything was handed to me. Everything was easy. I never had to work hard. Nobody wants that story. Mm-hmm.
No, you're working for it. Hey, you're working at...
It's working on what I can control, mm-hmm. Instead of worrying about what I can't. So, you know, just looking at the gym, for example, I love deadlifting. I was a great deadlifter. My PR was 650 pounds. And had I not done it in a competition, I probably could have done more. But when you're in a competition, you're already tired. I think this is the third event during the Kootenay's Strongest Sasquatch, which unfortunately only happened once. So
I was there.
I'm still the reigning third strongest Sasquatch in the Kootenays.
Nice.
So I've got that still. But, you know, after the injury happened, you know, for the longest time, and still really, just last week I did my first standing deadlift in over 15 months, and it was 225 pounds. So comparatively pretty light for me. Mm-hmm. But before that, you know, like I love lifting heavy things, and it's kind of my happy place. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to figure out a way to do something heavy. So I would do alternatives, and I would do what I could control, and I would do like a seated deadlift, which is just setting it up on the bench, and, you know, you basically just kind of sit up with it. Very, very heavy on the core, very heavy on the lower back and the mid back. And, you know, I could still pull over 500 pounds. As somebody who is recovering from a crippling injury. And, you know, same with like overhead presses, I would just do them seated instead of standing because my knee couldn't quite handle the pressure or anything like that. And obviously the priority is to heal and to recover. But, you know, if I didn't do that, if I would have just sat at home in my own sorrow and misery, you know, I think that's what would have crushed me. So, you know, I had to kind of spin things and be like, okay, like just do what you can do, control what you can control, and just do that. You know, at least it's doing something. It's better than nothing. It's better than, you know, wanting people to feel sorry for me and, you know, do everything for me. And, you know, that's just not me. I've always been very independent.
It's kind of the whole hold on to your heart piece, right? It's the hope and the faith, right? Like
Yeah.
if you didn't have those two things, you wouldn't be getting up and going to the gym again. If you didn't think if there wasn't hope and faith, right? Like
Yeah.
you have it and it shows. And I think like, yeah, that's how it shows, right? Getting up and doing it.
And that's not to say every day is easy. There are 100% days where, you know, I don't want to leave the house, and I don't. And sometimes I can last a week or 2 weeks. But, you know, eventually I almost get tired of doing nothing. So it's like, okay, I have to go do something now. So usually it'll be something like, okay, well, if I slam back some pre-workout, then I have to go to the gym, because anybody that's taken pre-workout and then got preoccupied and had to go do something else and they get all jittery from the pre-workout, you got to go to the gym. You got to do it.
What is it like when you have to spend that? Oh, I guess you've probably spent a lot of time alone in the last 15 months, but what do you, like, how is that on your mental health?
I mean, it's been a very isolating experience, you know, especially when you're having to relearn how to do the basics. You know, it's gotten a lot better now. Obviously, I've come a long way in my recovery, but you know, there was a period there, like showering, very difficult. Going to the bathroom was painful. Getting in and out of bed, not easy. Doing the laundry, a chore and a half. You know, like just doing basic housework and house cleaning was 100 times more difficult. Especially when I was still on the crutches. Because the downside with crutches is that you don't just use the use of like your leg, you also use both your hands because you need them to use the crutches.
Yeah.
So, you know, even something like bringing a frying pan over to the oven or over to the stove. It's like, okay, well, how do I need this hand, I need this hand. I don't have a spare hand. So, you know, I think that's, a lot of people probably don't realize that. It's like, you know, when you live alone, you still have to do all the basic things. And I still had a daughter to look after, which, believe me, that wasn't easy. Because she would have been 5 or 6 when I got injured. That's a very high energy time for a child. So, and also in a time where, you know, I don't think she fully understood right away, like what had happened to me. I think in her mind, it's suddenly like, now we can't go to the park and we can't go to the lake. You know, because that was a tough part too. You know, the things that I lost from that, you know, I lost an entire summer at the lake with my daughter. And then kind of spent the fall recovering from the first surgery. And then the second surgery was December 20th. So just before Christmas, just what I wanted for Christmas. But that was at the start of winter, essentially. So, you know, then again, I lost like a winter of going sledding with my daughter. And all of these, you know, different activities that we used to go to. Like we used to go hiking. Like I used to have her, when I was going through my big weight loss, like I would have her on like one of those carrier backpacks. And we would go hiking. And we would do all these things together, and then suddenly it's like, okay, well, we can't do that. And it's like, no, you can't even climb on me right now. So, you know, for a 5-6-year-old, I can only imagine how difficult that would have been for her, because like she doesn't get it, and that's not fair to her either. But you know, that was kind of the reality that I had to deal with, and you know, it's not like I have a spouse or whatever to, you know, kind of share the load with. You know, when I have my daughter, it's 100% me. You know, every now and then, you know, my mom, grandma would come by, and you know, she might take her for the afternoon or something, just give me a little bit of a break or something like that. But you know, she still works and she's got her life, and same with my sister and my brother. And you know, I've never been one to comfortably ask for help.
Why do you think not?
Because I feel like I'm bothering people, which is probably wrong, but you know, like, it's just like not wanting to be a nuisance. It's like, you know, I feel like I'm being a pain in the ass if I'm asking people like, oh, can you do this for me? Can you do my laundry for me? Can you come wash my dishes for me? You know, and I think to a degree, some people would just get annoyed with that or tired of that. Or it's different if, like, you know, it's a spouse or whatever. It's like it's kind of their marital obligation, you know, for sickness or in health or whatever they say. But I didn't have that. Not at the time. I mean, I did have that, and I lost that. You know, for better or worse, probably for better, but.
And I'm sure, well, I don't know, but did you miss having it when obviously that was happening?
You know, it's one of those situations in life where, you know, sometimes comparison can be the thief of joy. And, you know, a lot of the times, and social media is the worst for this, because, like, you see somebody like, oh, I broke my arm, and then it's like, oh, all my friends brought me soup and this and that, and it's like, nobody brought me shit. Like, how come I'm being forgotten about? It's like, my injury is a lot worse than a broken arm. But yeah, I didn't have that, so I had to figure it out on my own. You know, I've never had a lot of, like, close friends. I couldn't even tell you who my best friend is today. I don't know if I really have one. So, you know, I didn't have a lot of people to call on. And I'm sure there are probably people I could have called on. I know you had offered numerous times, and you know, which is appreciated. You did a couple of things, if I remember correctly, but
Not much, Darcy.
not much. I didn't ask for much. I didn't ask for much.
Now I'm like, oh no, I should have done more.
No, I wouldn't want anyone to feel like that, because, you know, it's my responsibility. If I feel like I need help, then I need to ask for it. You know, maybe it's the male bravado, in a sense. I think men in general have a lot more difficult time asking for help. I think it's a pride thing, in many cases. And then, like, for me, like, I'd gotten so comfortable being independent and doing everything on my own, and then it's, you know, having to relearn, like I said, all of the basics.
I feel like there's no hope for you now to ask for help, because if you've overcome this without asking for it, there's just no hope that you will that you'll ask for help. Do you today feel like you need help with things?
No. Well, I mean, I'm sure we all need a little bit of help from
What
time
would
to
you
time.
get help with if you could have one thing that you could have help with?
I mean, at this point, I don't think there's really anything. I mean, I can do all the basics now. I can clean my house. I can do my laundry. I can, you know, shower. that's an important one. That first shower after like 2-3 weeks of not being allowed to do anything, that one's pretty special. But yeah, after that they get easier.
So you feel pretty settled and pretty sorted now, and a little bit more stable.
Yeah, it's, you know, I think now the bigger thing is, like, how am I progressing with the rest of my life? Because like I said, they've classified me as permanently disabled, like basically a week ago.
Wow.
So now I'm going through this whole process of, I got injured at a physical job. I now have a whole list of limitations, which are like attached to me for employment. So I won't be going back to the job I got injured at because there's no suitable job for me there anymore because of my limitations. Mm-hmm. So I have been approved for what's called vocational, which is essentially like job retraining in a sense. But with, workers' compensation, if you think snails are slow, take a look at workers' compensation because it'll blow your mind by how slow everything moves. So I'm waiting to more or less resume life again. It's like my life has been on limbo, held hostage, so to speak. And I'm just waiting to, press the play button and resume again. But there's a lot of, stress and anxiety that comes with the fact that I don't know what I'll be doing. I definitely have an idea of the direction that I do want to go in, but it's a matter of, are they gonna play ball? Mm-hmm. Are they gonna let me do that? Mm-hmm. Because at the end of the day, I do feel that it is my life, and that should matter. Mm-hmm. And what I want to do with my life, as long as it's within reason. I'm not saying like, I want to be a doctor making $200,000 a year. That's not realistic and that's not going to happen. But, if I can do something that, I'm physically capable of doing, but also enjoy doing and love doing, I mean, that seems to make far more sense than we're going to make you push buttons on a cash register. Because to me, that's like setting up to fail. Because I can be very stubborn, and if you throw me into something that I just do not want to do, I won't do it. Mm-hmm. I think that's why some jobs didn't work out. I couldn't find the passion in it. Doing a sales job. This was after the car sales, and it's like not caring about the product, because it's not a product that I have ever used. Mm-hmm. And it's really hard to sell something when it's like that, when you don't have the passion behind it. Totally. And you just don't really care about it. Trying to explain like, oh, you can use it with this and this and that, and it's like, I don't even know what this, that, and that is.
Yeah. Well, I hope that they can set you up with something that you are passionate about, because, do something that feels like you, right? Not something that you're forced to do and kind of against your will, something that you want to do and you're choosing to do. And that's my hope for you, is that you get support with that.
I'm looking at it as a reset in a sense. I was trying to go down certain paths. They just, I was meeting dead ends or U-turns or whatever it might be, and nothing was like really sticking. And maybe that's part of me, just not putting in as much effort as I should have. Mm-hmm. But again, it's hard to put effort into something when you just don't feel it.
You talked about pressing the play button on life again, right? And mm-hmm. resuming. And what is the thing that you're most excited for?
I mean, just a lot with a lot of the financial struggles that have come with the result of dealing with this. I'm just looking forward to like earning an income again. As sad as that might sound, but when your income is held hostage and you have zero options to increase it, and you're struggling as a result of that, and no matter what you do, nobody with the powers to change anything seems to care, because it is very bureaucratic. It's insurance essentially is what they are. So to have that freedom back, and and if I'm able to do that doing something that I enjoy and I love to do, then it doesn't feel like work anymore. Mm-hmm. It's it allows me to, because, the unfortunate part about life is we all need money. And when you don't have enough of it, it makes life a lot more difficult, especially in this day and age with everything getting just more and more expensive. I think prices went up at least 20% from the time I got injured to now. And when your income doesn't go up at all and you have no options to have it go up, it causes a lot of stress and a lot of anxiety and a lot of panic in a sense. Going back, like praying for a miracle. Like I would have conversations with God with tears rolling down my eye, and I would ask the questions like, what did I do to deserve this? I've never been perfect, but I've always tried to be a good person. I've never intentionally cheated anyone or wronged anyone or like to put myself ahead. I try to treat people with respect, and respect given is respect earned. Sometimes some certain people will rub me the wrong way, and whether they're catching me on a bad day or whatever it might be, but they'll get the Irish blood boiling, and they'll sometimes get a bit of an earful. But other than that, I've always tried to be a good person, and sometimes the bad things happen to the good people, but it's for good reasons that we don't know yet. I'm a firm believer in the law of attraction, even though I'm still figuring out how it works clearly. I'm a firm believer that everything happens for a reason, even though we don't understand it at the time. And I think the best example that I can think of is, the relationship I had with my daughter's mother. We were married, and it was kind of shortly after marriage that she had a lot of anger that started coming out, and I didn't know how to deal with it because I never saw my parents scream at each other, not once. So I wasn't used to that, having somebody screaming at me over nothing, and I hesitate to say too much because I'm not trying to paint her as the bad person. We had our differences, and at the end of the day, she's the mother of my child, and I have to respect that. And I've never publicly downed her, and I'm not about to start. But we had a lot of conflict, and there was a lot of arguing and verbal fighting, never physical. But at the end of the day, we weren't good for each other, and I think the whole relationship just became very toxic. And if I were to look back at just that, it was not a good experience for me. But the result of that is our daughter. So that's the good that came out of it. So, would I go through all of that again? 100%, because I got a daughter out of it. And that's my example of everything happens for a reason. I would go through bad marriage, bad relationship, toxic relationship, and we get life out of it. And that life is kind of what sparked a lot of the change within myself. Because I'm a very different person than who I was 7-8 years ago. I had very little motivation back then. I had very different thoughts back then. And when I found out I was going to be a father, that's kind of sparked the change. Because I would look at myself and think, this is not who I want to show my daughter. And I'm still working on it to this day, but I'm conscious about it, that I'm trying to improve and trying to create a better life for her, for myself. And none of that would have happened if she wasn't born. Because that sparked my own personal development, journey. I started reading personal development books. I started thinking a lot more differently. And then it was after the marriage ended, that's when I started taking my physical health a lot more seriously. Lost that 80 pounds, even though I did get it back. Although I traded it for a lot of muscles, so I'm all right with that. But yeah, everything happens for a reason. Even if it seems absolutely horrible and shitty at the time, it could take 1, 2, 5, 10 years to come to fruition. And then you'll think about that moment and be like, if that one thing didn't happen, none of the rest of the things would have happened to lead me here. Mm-hmm. So, it's hard to focus on the pain and the negativity when I have proof.
Yes.
That the positivity can come out of it. So, with the law of attraction and everything, like I said, I'm still figuring it out. I do try to be intentional about my thoughts. I try to take out any thoughts of like jealousy. I think that's the biggest killer there. When you see people, like if you see someone with like, say like a nice Ferrari or something, be like, ooh, must be nice. To me, with the law of attraction, what you're telling the universe is like, I don't like that person with that car. But what you're really saying is, I don't like that car.
So you'll never get it.
Which is the universe saying, okay, not for you then. It's like people that have a lot of positive things to say will always find positive things to talk about. Yeah. Where people with a lot of negativity and negative things, like the victim mentalities, they'll always find something to be negative about, to be a victim about. Mm-hmm. And, you need to be intentional, mm-hmm. I think, in those thoughts, which is what I work hard on. And yeah, some days are tough. Some days are like, what the hell is going on? But you just got to kind of step back and take a breather. And
is that kind of what is helping you now? Like, is
being
intentional and working at the law of attraction as you frame it?
I think so. I'll spend. I've got a lot of free time. Mm-hmm. The time is what I'm most bountiful in. Because of 15 months, I've done almost nothing. I haven't gone to work. I would go to physio, I would go to the chiropractor, I'd go to the gym. And that's basically it. That's been my life for the last 15 months until I can, hit the play button again.
Do you feel like you want to talk down to yourself in that? I mean, I guess there's probably so many layers for you, like when you talk about financial stress and not being able to show up for the things that you used to like to do, but do you find your critical voice like really active, saying like, oh, when you say you did nothing, like, do you feel like that voice is really active, or do you have a lot of compassion for your situation and where you've
I think it's been very up and down, because I do deal with, depression just like anybody else. I've never been clinically diagnosed or anything like that, but, we all have sad feelings. Mm-hmm. And, I think the times where that would peak is when I would kind of like lose that track and focus more on the negative things that were happening at the time, mm-hmm. Which would elevate the feelings of depression. Mm-hmm. So, I would then have to switch that and do like visualization practices and just visualize, this is what my life is going to look like.
Who taught you about this, like this method of kind of changing your views?
I think just from a lot of the personal development that I've done. One of the very first books that I read in personal development, which I would recommend anybody read, is it's called A Happy Pocket Full of Money by Dr. David Cameron Gikandi. And it's a law of attraction book. And it's the first part is very almost like scientific. It explains the quantum physics side of the law of attraction. So it's very, very interesting, very dry part. But all throughout the book, I don't know how many times it says it. It could be multiple times per page, but it says, I am wealth, I am abundance, I am joy. Which is those like things that you're supposed to like repeat to yourself, you know, until you feel those things. And that book had such an impact on me that my daughter is briefly named after it. So she has two middle names. Her mother picked her first name. She was named after a past relative. But she wanted two middle names, and I got to pick them both. So the two names that I ended up going with were Myra and Joy. So Myra, in the American meaning of the name, is abundance. And joy, that one's self-explanatory. So when it came to naming her, you know, she is abundance, she is joy. She gives me all the wealth I need.
It's so nice.
So, you know, it's it had an impact on me. So I think just a lot of that. I mean, I've got a bookshelf full of books, and I've read most of them. And you know, a lot of influential people that I would listen to, and you know, different podcasts and things like that. And
it's really admirable because it does take a lot of self-discipline to be able to kind of guide yourself to those books and read them and do the thing like visualize and meditate and pray and do the things, right, that are ultimately going to be better for your health when you're sitting alone and after a severe injury for 15 months, right? Like to still be able to do those things or find the desire to, I just think is really admirable that you kind of, you know, even though you might not be asking for help, you do know what you need in order to help yourself, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that's really, really admirable. And
yeah, it's not the easiest process, but you know, it is doable. And when you see stories of people who have come from worse and have done so much better, you know that it is possible.
totally.
So I think that's, you know, the belief part of it. Because yeah, I mean, like I will do a lot of visualizing, and you know, like this is the house I live in. You know, things like that. This is the car I'm driving. What does it feel like? What does it smell like? What is it? You know, how does it handle? You know, and they might seem silly to a lot of people to do these sort of things. And it might even feel silly for me to do them because, you know, I haven't seen the results of the, you know, the mindfulness and the call it spiritual healing, I guess. You know, it can feel silly when you don't see the results right away because, you know, we're in such an instant gratification society now, where if it doesn't happen right now, you know, people give up on it. And, you know, I think you got to stick it through and, you know, you got to see the fruit trees grow. You know, you spend all the time planting them.
Takes a while sometimes. Yeah. Let's talk about your shirt.
So, Crypt to Ripped. So it's a YouTube channel I started. And I think this was something I needed to do for my own sanity. I needed to, I'm a big fan of leading by example. And, you know, anyone that's followed me on like Instagram, for example, you know, with all the strongman stuff and things like that, you know, I show a lot of that stuff and, you know, maybe a little bit of its glout. But, you know, I had someone I knew that I worked with years ago, and he had put on quite a bit of weight. And when I went through my big weight loss phase, he saw that. And he lost like 80 pounds himself. And then he told me one day, he's like, I saw that you did it, and I knew that I could do it too. So, you know, that's the big part of the lead by example. You don't know who it's going to affect. So that's kind of where Crypt to Ripped came from. You know, I could have chosen to, you know, play the victim, everybody feels sorry for me. Or I could put in the work and show people that it doesn't matter the circumstances, you can overcome. You may have to adapt, but you can overcome. And you know, that's kind of what I wanted to do with this. So that's where the Crypt to Ripped came from, because
I love it.
It's a very legitimate crippling injury that I endured. And you know, I've still got the ripped portion of it, but it's too ripped, so it's you know, we're still getting there. So it's not done yet, but
It doesn't say Crypt now ripped. It says too ripped.
yeah. We're in the two phase.
We're in the two.
Yeah. We're in the two part of it. So,
I like it.
so, you know, it's a small channel. I've got a whole whopping 20 subscribers now, and which is more than the 0 I started with.
There you go.
And
It's a win.
you know, I'm still trying to figure out the direction that I want to take it. Like right now, it's mostly shorts or reels. I'm just doing some, you know, neat stuff like seated deadlifts, or you know, just recently the first standing overhead press that I've done, the first standing deadlift that I've done in, you know, 14, 15 months. You know, just I want to show the perseverance of that, because like I said, you don't know who you might inspire.
What's your favorite part about being a dad?
It's an interesting question. I can tell you the thing that I look forward to the most, even like right when she was born, is having those life conversations. You know, trying to pass on my own wisdoms and try to teach the mistakes that I've made, because you know, I always say there's two ways to learn, either from your own mistakes or from others. So I would rather teach her the others, so she doesn't make the same ones. And you know, maybe it sounds bad, but you know, as she gets older and older, and you know, becomes, you know, like into adulthood and everything like that, and getting to witness, you know, how she grows as a person. And not to say I'm trying to influence, you know, what she does in life. I want her to be able to decide what she wants to do in life. I just want to influence her to have the courage to go after whatever she wants. And I think that's my favorite part. And still the part that I'm looking forward to the most.
That's so nice. Is there anything that you wanted to share that you haven't had a chance to?
You know, I feel like I've talked about so much that I don't think there is anything I missed.
No, it's been really good. You kind of, you know, the podcast kind of has a kind of a flow to it, and I feel like you know, it's kind of the challenge that someone has gone through, and you know, their experience in it, and then basically the hope, right? That there is hope, and I think that you nailed all of that and kind of expressed it all, right? And I'm sorry about your setback, and you know, the things that you had to lose in this last 15 months of dealing with this injury. And I just feel like your life is just beginning, like you say, that play button, right? And hit and play, and whatever you want, you can start to pursue again. And I got a friend in you, and yeah, I think it's just amazing the mindset that you've been able to come back to, even if it hasn't always been perfectly maintained, right? And it sounds like some pretty hard, dark days in there, but you persevere, and you do have that hope, and you have that faith, and it radiates, you know. So you think maybe it's these, you know, you show up every day, you're doing these minuscule things, and you don't think that anything's happening, right? But they are, right? And you're radiating that and you're sharing that, and it surely will help one person, you know, that thinks that something that they're going through physically, mentally is debilitating, and it may be for some time, right? But there's always that opportunity. I shouldn't always say always, but there is that opportunity most times to come back to see why, right? And to know the why, right? So I appreciate what you do and appreciate the friend that you've been and who you are in the community and in the gym. And I think that's a good role model, like you say, lead by example to young men. And, you know, I just think that you're, definitely a really great person to have in Cranbrook.
Thank you.
So I appreciate you coming on to the podcast and sharing a bit of yourself and your struggles today and the honesty and the vulnerability to kind of sit and share yourself with us.
It was my pleasure.
Thank you. Thanks, Darcy.
Hey, I'm Morgan. I'm the producer of the Hold On to Your Heart Project podcast. Thanks for tuning in to another episode. If you'd like to find out more about what we're all about and check out other episodes, you can find us at holdontoyourheartproject.com or on YouTube and Instagram at Hold On to Your Heart Project. Thanks for stopping by.